let's say a finch species. Darwin's finches. Remember the finches? There are finches on mainland South America. And let's say a storm comes up and blows some finches to the islands of the Galapagos. And those finches are isolated on those islands. They can't leave. It's too far of a distance to fly back without a nice big storm. So you're kind of stuck on the island. And you have to adapt to that island. And perhaps the only thing to eat on the island are seeds that have to be cracked with your beak. So the only finches that can crack the seeds are ones that have particularly thick beaks. And so over a short period of time, the thin beaks ones all kind of die out because they aren't getting enough food, but the thick beak ones are surviving. And so you end up with some thick beak finches on this island. So now the finch population has separated, you see. Whereas one we had what I'll call your normal finches. You still have your normal finches on mainland South America, but you have your thick-beaked finches now that have developed on the Galapagos Islands.
What is this called?
This is speciation. It's called speciation. It's evolution.
Is it not speciation?
Speciation, like species, forming a new species. Speciation.
Question, Charles?
And so, yeah, question.
Well, the thick-beaked finches, can they still mate with the normal finches?
Well, now maybe. So, if you put the thick-beaked finches back with the normal-beaked finches, will they be able to mate with them? Maybe they will. But if enough changes occurred, maybe they won't. Maybe either they won't want to mate with them because they don't recognize them as their own species, or maybe they can't mate with them because physically they've changed so much where they don't, the sperm won't fertilize the egg because there are chemical differences, or the genitalia don't fit together. There are actually scientific names for this kind of thing. And if you look, maybe their mating seasons have changed, where they're mating at different times. And this kind of shows this evolutionary tree. You see how this is like the branches of a tree, where the trunk of a tree is here and it goes up into branches? And you can imagine this branching can occur. Now the thick-beaked finches, if they go some on a different island, you can get another branch form here with thick beak and, I don't know, dark beak versus, there could be all these differences, and you can get all these branches, and these branches can continue to occur. And so that's what they've shown here has happened with these giraffes that are located in different areas. And we now have 5 different, looks like 6 different species of giraffes. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. I don't know. If you study giraffes, maybe they can't, or maybe they won't. Won't and can't, either of them, if they won't or if they can't, they don't in nature. And so you end up with an isolated population that can become different from one another. Only when you're mating within a population does the population genetically stay the same. If you quit mating with another population, mutations will occur, and the mutation will be isolated in your population, and over time, your populations will become different. What were you going to ask? Or I think she was.
Me?
Yeah. Go ahead, Kate.
Isn't that like a pre-zygotic isolation?
Yeah, that's what I was going to go to next. Yeah. Yes, Emery.
If a group of people are like on an island and
Mhm.
like they don't come in contact with like us at all,
Uh-huh.
and like could we like have babies or no? Like would enough like mutation like
If enough differences built up in your population, perhaps they wouldn't be able to mate with us. Like for instance, if something came up in their population, some mutations came up where their sperm changed a little bit. Then in the sperm, the sperm have a little enzyme in their head that allows them to eat and get into the egg. And if that changed a little bit in their population, then maybe their sperm wouldn't be able to get into your egg, and you would be completely unable to have kids then.
So then they wouldn't be considered humans?
They would be considered a new species. That's correct. But all humans that are on this planet are considered to be the same species, because as far as we've found, when any human mates with another from any other population, they are able to have kids. So we haven't isolated any group of humans to any extent that we know of that's not able to have kids with any other human on the planet.
What about like people that can't have babies? Is that like?
That's just like.
That's something different.
Yeah, that's not considered to be a different species. They have individual problems. Yeah, there are things that happen to individuals where they can't mate, but that's not involved in this argument. Yeah.
Like looking at the map, the 3 in East Africa, the 3 species, the ranges touch, so surely
Yes.
they might have contact.
So they might have contact, but maybe they don't mate, If this one right here, if this is a female and it's looking for a male to mate with, would you mate with one with this type of spots? No, you would think that would be very foreign looking to you if you were that giraffe, and you might go, that one, something's wrong with that one. I'm not mating with him. He's got weird spots. Must have some disease. And so you often won't mate with something that looks different enough. Even if you could, you often won't. And that isolates your population. You could imagine if there was some mutation in your DNA, and you were in this population, and the mutation wasn't necessarily bad, it just made you a little different, some gene that is a little bit different. If it didn't have any obvious effect, then that gene could be passed from one organism to another. It might end up being passed through your population where all members of your population has that gene, but no other members do, because that mutation happened in your population. There's no way this population could have gotten that mutation. So there are differences that build up slowly in the DNA over time that make groups different. And it may have enough of a change that it makes you different enough where you can't mate with other populations. And when that happens, you're a new species. And you have had a fork, a branch. And maybe in this branch, these are all giraffes, and all the giraffes look pretty similar. But maybe over here in this branch, these are horses, you see. And horses are a bit different from giraffes. The giraffes slowly evolved their long necks and such to reach food, but the horse branch never evolved long necks. And so they end up looking fundamentally different than giraffes, and over enough time will not mate with these branches over here. They are significantly different now after enough time has passed. Yes?
Okay, so like horses and donkeys, they're not really attracted to each other, are they? I mean,
I don't know.
How do we get them to mate?
I don't know. Maybe they are attracted to one another.
I have a question.
I don't know.
Hey, if
They do mate.
if mules cannot mate,
Yes.
why are some humans? If some humans are sterile, is that something totally different?
Sure, yeah.
It's something different.
Oh, she did.
That's something different. I don't.
Because they're not
There's lots of reasons humans can be sterile.
Okay.
Your plumbing's not working right. You've had a disease that damages something. You have a low sperm count. Your hormones aren't right. There's all sorts of things. Here we have the horse and the donkey. If they mate, they get a mule. A mule's hybrid, and it is sterile. Sometimes mules can mate and have a baby mule, but that mule is sterile. You never get a lasting line of mules. And I don't know why that is, but obviously horses, where's my pen? Obviously on some evolutionary tree somewhere, let me erase finches so you're not thinking that horses are related to finches. On some evolutionary tree somewhere, there was a branch where horses and donkeys were on that tree, and they share some recent ancestor, but they diverged, and they're at a point at which horses are different enough from donkeys where if they try to mate, they don't have any offspring that can also mate, so they're different enough where they're considered different species. They're still pretty close. And probably if you went back in time far enough, they could have mated and had a lasting a progeny that can have kids. But now they're so different that they can't.
Is it possible that in the future they de-evolve so they could actually have a...
Usually that doesn't occur though, because if your population is isolated from this one, you're building a mutation happens over here that's obviously going to be different from one over here. So things just get more and more different, not more and more the same.
Okay.
So they evolved to the point where they couldn't have kids? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's exactly what happened. They've changed drastically enough where they can't mate with one another.
Well, I mean, where they can't have mules. Like.
Yeah, they probably would happen, yeah. If you let more time go by, in another few million years, they probably won't even be able to have mules, because they'll have changed even more. Yeah.
So, can mules be considered a population?
No, mules are considered a hybrid, which is a cross between two separate species.
I've ridden one.
You've ridden a mule?
In the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
They're better than donkeys.
Girl horse and a boy donkey.
Can it be either way?
Yeah. It could be a girl donkey and a boy horse.
Well, I think that's a different animal.
Oh, really? Oh.
Maybe.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I might be wrong.
I have to look that one up.
I don't know.
I've never seen this.
That's a zebroid. Have you ever heard of a zebroid? It's a cross between a zebra and a horse. They're also sterile.
Can we
that's
awesome. My sister's sweet 16. She got.
Wait, is that also called a zorse?
Yeah, a zorse.
Oh, okay.
A
That's
zebroid or a zorse.
Can we look up a liger?
Is there such thing as a zonkey?
There's a liger.
They're like 9 feet. Ligers are huge.
Yeah, that's a liger. It's also sterile.
That looks really like Photoshop. Like it's just Photoshop with the background.
There's like this
Yeah.
one couple that has it. And if you look at liger on Google, every picture is the same two people. There's probably like 1,000
Super zoomed in.
There's only one like.
Let's go back here. I want to talk about, your book talks about habitat isolation, isolating mechanisms. There's lots of ways species can become isolated. The most common type is called habitat isolation. That's where you get split because you end up at separate locations. That's the most common way this happens. Like the finches. You end up on an island and you can't leave. This happens often with continental drift. Do y'all remember South America and Africa were once connected?
Yeah.
Well, over millions of years, those continents broke up and spread out. And now Africa's way over here and South America's way over here. The organisms are isolated from one another now. And so continental drift leads to new populations, to more evolution. Did y'all know that India was once connected to Antarctica and to South America? And it broke off, and India floated all the way across the ocean, all the way up from the coldest part of the world, through past the hottest part of the world, through the equator, and ended up slamming into Asia and formed those Himalayan mountains. That's a lot of traveling that India went through. And you can imagine the organisms on there had to change. They had to adapt and change from cold weather to warm weather, and then back to cold, some of them. And of course it took millions of years for that to happen, so they had time to evolve and change. But you see this in the fossil record, so you got a lot of different species evolving in that area. Australia the same way. It's moved and has been isolated, so new species have evolved there. Yes?
With like Pangea and stuff, what made them start to
They're plate tectonics. You can learn about this if you ever take geology. Hot liquid magma comes up from the center of the earth, and it kind of goes like that, and the plates, the continents sit on top of this hot magma, and they kind of pull it to either side, and they start moving. It happens real slowly. They move about that far a year. But over 40 million years, it's thousands of miles.
Keep moving outwards?
They move and then they come back. And it seems like about every billion years they do that. They break apart and come back together.
You don't think, no one thinks that North America and China will ever?
No, they probably won't. It's gonna get close to over there and then come back. Yeah. They think that's happened 5 times in the history of the world. There's been 5 supercontinents. The most recent one was called Pangea, but they think there's been 4 others. Amazing. Yeah.
How long did it take the Himalayas to form? A long time?
They're still forming.
Well, they're young.
They're still forming. They're young mountains yet. Anyway, that's habitat isolation. But there's also temporal isolation. Let me show you what temporal isolation is. Here's 5 species of frogs. Bullfrogs, green frogs, pickerel frogs, leopard frogs, and wood frogs. They all kind of look similar, but they all have different mating times. For instance, the pickerel frog starts doing its calls around late April. The green frog does its calls in June. Imagine a species of frog a long time ago that probably mated around May 1st. Most of the frogs of that species have there's a bell curve distribution for mating time, and most of the frogs like to mate around May 1st. What if you were one of these frogs on the periphery that likes to mate closer to June? And you're waiting, and all these frogs are mating, and it comes to your time, and now you want to mate, and it's June. Well, the only ones left to mate with are the couple of others that happen to be born that want to mate around that time. And there might be only 1 or 2 others. And you all mate because you like to mate around that time, and you have a bunch of kids, and guess what? Your kids like to mate around that time too. And so all of a sudden, there's this population that's only mating around this time. And they only mate with one another because that's the ones that like to mate around this time. And if there's some mutation in their population gets passed around their population, and pretty soon you end up with this new group that just likes to mate around June 1st. And they're kind of separate from this population that likes to mate around May 1st. There's a little bit of overlap. That's how you end up with all these different species of frogs. They're not isolated by space, they're isolated by time, temporal isolation. They like to reproduce at different times.
They just happen to start looking a little bit different?
That's right. One of them had a mutation that made them darker in color, or lighter in color, or have a lower voice, or a higher voice. And since it's one that likes to mate around that time, that just gets passed through one's mating at that time. And you end up with different populations that are different. So you don't have to be isolated by space. You can be isolated other ways. And that's what this chart goes into. I don't want to go over every one of these. Behavioral isolation, if you're born doing a different mating dance. Most of the blue-footed boobies go like this.
What kind is that?
That's the blue-footed booby dance. I know it because I watched them. And they got to do that dance just right. But what if you're born a blue-footed booby that does this? Well, no one's going to mate with you. Except that one. Because she likes that. She likes that new move. And both of y'all are doing that dance. Because she likes it and you like it. And guess what? If you have a bunch of kids, they're all going to be doing that dance. Because that's the instructions they were born with. There was a mutation, you see. And so then, all your kids are going to be doing that dance, and they'll be mating with one another because they don't like that other stupid dance that the other boobies are doing. And so you end up with this whole group that's isolated by behavior from this other group. A behavioral isolation, you see. And mutations can run through their entire population, and it won't mix with mutations that are in the other population. And so your group will be different. Look at this, mechanical isolation. That's one of my favorites. Genitalia between species are unsuitable for one another. The old square peg won't fit into the round hole. I got an entire essay once when I was grading essays on mechanical isolation techniques. And this guy knew everything about it. Apparently he had done some research on it. And went into all these different animals' genitalia and how they're different, and the penis won't fit in the vagina of this thing, and I didn't even know if any of it was right, but I gave him a 10 anyway because it was so well discussed. He obviously knew about what he was talking about.
Is the behavioral the mating dances?
Yeah, mating dances or songs or calls or pheromones or something like that.
He's probably laughing. Can animals control their own pheromones?
No, but if you're born with a little different smell, and another organism likes that smell.
Isn't that why ants travel in lines?
That's right. Those are pheromones.
Why?
So ants get in your house.
The ants behind them.
Yeah, if an ant finds food in a hill, they'll come back and leave a trail of pheromone smells, and then the other ants will follow that. That's why they're in line.
When you walk up to him,
There's the blue-footed booby.
It could have changed your life.
How many of those were there?
They're all over the
do the
place.
dance, do the dance.
You could almost
Do the dance for me.
not avoid standing on them.
Do you have a video?
I like the way they dance.
There is, yeah, you can find video footage of them.
So why are their feet blue? Is it cold outside?
I like horses.
They're
It's
blue-footed boobies.
sexual. It's a sexual selection. The girls like the blue feet, or the boys like the blue. Blue feet is so it stays in the population because it's for mating.
For the liger.
Yeah, that was a liger.
Oh, look how pretty. They're cute. Those are scary.
These are. It talks about in the reading. I don't want to take too much time on this stuff. It talks about in the reading these are different species of salamander that have evolved in California that have been studied intensely. And originally, you go back. This is the founding species, and these things spread throughout California a good while ago, but they change depending on what area they're in. Like the ones that are now here in southeast California, they're even a different color. And this color didn't used to exist, but it's there now, and nothing will mate with it because it's yellow and you're kind of scary. And gosh, I'm not going to mate with that yellow one. If this one happens to meet that one, they aren't going to mate with one another. So new populations are evolving right now of these salamanders. Something interesting I read in Popular Science not too long ago. There's a species of elephant that has come about in Africa that has no tusks. Because the reason why their elephants are going extinct is because they're killed for their ivory. And so there were a couple that came about that had real small tusks and or no tusks, and they mated with one another, and they had babies with no tusks, and nobody kills those. They leave them alone because they do just fine.
How recently did that happen?
This is in the last. It's come about in the last 30 years, and now there's a bunch of them.
I think I read the same article. Like in the 1800s, the percentage of no tuskless elephants was pretty low.
Right.
And then now
there's a bunch, and nobody messes with them.
Elephant to take the tusks?
Well, the poachers do, yeah. Poachers just shoot them and then cut them.
Leave the body?
Yeah, well, it's an elephant. You can't.
Equalize it and cut it off.
Yeah, poachers, they don't. They're gonna mess with it. Yeah.
What's ivory? I don't know, I was learning like. Ivory's nice.
It's just, yeah, it's just, you can make like dishes and stuff out of it.
Yeah,
A lot of people just keep it as a trophy. Piano, ivory keys.
Why wouldn't you just wait until the
It's a lot of
elephants
paint.
die to take this?
Because you can sell that stuff and make money.
Ivory's so precious,
Devils.
and it's so few of it.
Because I don't have 80 years to wait till that elephant dies. I want my money now.
Like, if you think about it, elephants are
Takes more money.
dying, like, it's not like the old elephants.
And the Vietnamese
Yeah, but if
are
I
hungry.
shoot him now, I don't have to wait until he dies. I can get
But
the.
they're not dead ones, like.
No, they're not just a bunch of dead ones like.
Yeah, I mean, poaching's caused the extinction of
The
some
last,
animals, like
National
rhinoceros.
Geographic like 2
To some extent.
Yeah.
ago, I don't know. But it was about like the ivory, like.
Yeah, I saw that blood
And
ivory.
like there's like
Bali and
it's
Javanese
like spread
rhino.
picture of just like dead elephants like mutilated on the
Can we
ground.
just use
Yeah,
something to
yeah.
do?
Live without their trash. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
so why don't they just chop them off?
It's hard to get elephants.
It's an elephant.
Poachers don't want to mess around with that. They just want to kill it and make sure it's dead.
Poaching.
Take off the
They never forget.
But they don't, so that.
They don't.
I think elephant tracking
All right,
would
listen
be
up.
very expensive.
This is the South American iguana. And these are the Galapagos iguanas. That's the land iguana and that's the marine iguana. Two different species. These two iguanas evolved from this iguana. Somehow this iguana got to the Galapagos and changed, had to change into these two types.
Was that you?
No,
Did you guys make it?
I did.
What is that?
I've got pictures.
Will an iguana bite you?
No, they're herbivores. They eat algae.
In St. Thomas, they like.
Or someone.
They growl at you.
Yeah. They're having problems with those in Florida, right? They're destroying the sand dunes and things like that, right?
Not the marine ones, but they live like near the water.
So, what this is called, this whole process of going from one species to many, it's called adaptive radiation.
Uh-oh.
I skipped through some things here, but I want you to read about it. There are lots of examples of all this speciation and such, and they go through a bunch of them with you.
What is it?
Adaptive radiation is a species spreading out and going from one species to many.
Based on all these different types of isolation.
Yeah, because of all this isolation that's going on, you can form, one species can form many. This is a type of bird called the Hawaiian honey creeper. And there's lots of different species of them on the Hawaiian Islands. We find, just like on the Galapagos, in island groups, you often get many, many species come about because different islands have different habitats. And so all these Hawaiian honey creepers came from a single descendant. And if you find it in the fossil record, there's only one type. But now there's a lot of types. And so we call that, the whole process is adaptive radiation. And if it's real, if it really happens, you would expect to find lots of organisms recently in the fossil record and fewer organisms a long time ago in the fossil record. And that's exactly what we see. This is more evidence that this process is going on. And I got a little video clip here where they talk about that.
Lucy's species should have evolved according to laws of evolution, which state that major evolutionary events occur when there is a sudden and dramatic environmental change. Those who cannot adapt to the new world die. But some animals will have a chance mutation that may help them survive in the new environment. These survivors will form the basis of a new species. Slowly, these new species will start to exploit all the different ecological niches in the new environment. Gradually, these creatures will adapt to these different niches, and slowly one new species will evolve into two.
We can see how this happens where something new arises, there's a new adaptation, a slightly better way of getting hold of food, of avoiding a predator, of walking across a landscape. And that then gives that population an advantage. It spreads out into new areas. Where you had one population, you now have two. Where you have one species, you now have two species.
This is how evolutionary family trees develop. Two species split to form separate branches. These branches can split again, and then again. And so a whole host of related species will develop.
So what is happening is that each time you're getting proliferation of branches, you're getting divergence taking place, and with that divergence comes what we think of as an adaptive radiation.
Adaptive radiation is one of the fundamental truths of evolution. There are signs of it in virtually every type of animal that has ever lived. Like the cat family.
The cats are a beautiful example of an adaptive radiation because you can see what they all have in common. They have in common the fact that they are hunters and stalking hunters, and they have diversified from a common ancestor into everything from lions, which are very large, to wild cats and lynxes that can live in cold environments, to indeed domestic cats today. So they are a beautiful example of this, the shape of evolution.
Adaptive radiation has given cats a classic evolutionary family tree. Lots of related species coming from lots of different branches. It means the cat family tree has a distinctly bushy appearance. And tracing any individual creature's line of ancestors is a complex business.
So, you can imagine what the common ancestor of cats, all the way back here at the beginning of the tree, probably had the features that it had. By looking at all the cats there are today, they all share kind of some common features. I mean, what are some of the features?
Whiskers.
Whiskers. They got whiskers. They got the tail.
They're pointy ears.
They kind of stop. You know how every one of those cats do. The pointy ears.
Nocturnal.
Fur. Yeah, nocturnal. That's another one. Most of them are nocturnal. Some of them aren't. What else?
I never knew that.
What?
Why do you think a cat sleeps in the day?
Yeah.
So I thought Elsa was like the laziest cat.
What is that?
Cats sleep in the day.
Yeah, most cats, but some of them have evolved and changed a bit.
Where are domestic cats, are they still nocturnal?
Yeah,
they're
night.
They just sleep all the time.
Yeah.
Not if they're an outsider.
You get to see my cat. She won't leave my room. I can't get her to
So
leave.
imagine, Darwin imagined that this was happening, and then he rewound everything back. You know, if you go back in time, the tree gets smaller, and you go from all these branches on this big tree to finally this original trunk, which would represent the first organism that existed on Earth. At one time, there must have been one single organism that started this branching tree, and here we have this huge tree today with millions of species. One single common ancestor, which was the first living thing on Earth.
What?
And so what does everything have in common that the first common ancestor must have had?
Carbon, hydrogen.
Well, a cell. A cell, yeah, a cell that's made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. The first living thing must have been a single cell. Probably had a plasma membrane. It had DNA, probably. Every organism has DNA. The first ones didn't even have mitochondria.
I thought that's how everything evolved. Was it the mitochondria?
Well, the mitochondria were absorbed.
The mitochondria were actually absorbed into other cells.
What are the first
Even the endoplasmic reticulum they didn't have. Ribosomes. All cells that even the most primitive have ribosomes.
Where did the first cell come from?
That's next chapter.
Organic soup.
Next chapter is how the first cell get there.
Organic soup.
But what Darwin imagined is,
Miller array.
Darwin didn't have any way of knowing about chemical evolution. And so he imagined that there was single organisms, maybe one or maybe a few, that started all life. And he was probably right about that. There are lots of evidence that is correct.
Miller array, right?
We call this, we'll do that next chapter. We call this type of tree a phylogenetic tree. I beeped. And we're going to learn how to look at these trees and make these phylogenetic trees and read them.
Not now, right?
I'm not going to watch that. Now, another thing the book talks about, if we look at this adaptive radiation, we see organisms becoming very different over time. But there's another type of evolution that we see out there. It's called convergent evolution. Sometimes organisms become where they look the same. I'll give you an example. Take a dolphin. Look at a dolphin. It's got fins. It's got a streamlined body. If you took a 5-year-old kid and you showed him a dolphin, they'd say, "Oh, it's a big fish." Because the dolphin looks just like a fish.
Mammal.
Dolphins and fish have converged in their evolution. They have evolved to look the same. And indeed, things that swim around in the ocean have to have a certain look to them to survive. Darwin noted the Maya, or the Patagonian hare, and looks just like a rabbit. Did I show you those pictures back then? When we did the Maya and the rabbit look just the same, because they live in the same type of area, and you have to look that way to survive in those areas. We call this convergent evolution. Look at these fish that you find in Lake Tanganyika, which is right there. Other fish in Lake Malawi, which is right there, and they're separated. And some original fish of different types got into those lakes a long, long time ago and have evolved into all these different types of fish. And evolution has produced the same looking different species. You know, ones that live near the bottom had to have a certain look. Ones that live near the top need to have a different look. And so these fish look similar because of what we call convergent evolution. They've converged, the evolution has turned their body to a certain look. Here is the finch family tree. The common ancestor lives on the coast of Ecuador here and somehow got into the islands. We don't know how. Perhaps it was blown in a storm. There's evidence of
Storms can blow birds.
Storms can blow birds long distances, thousands of miles in some cases. Yeah, that would be scary, wouldn't it, if you were a bird in a storm?
I hate birds. What's that drama?
Nobody come here.
What?
Hold on, I want to go to my other.
Enchanted.
Oh, you're not trash. Enchanted. Well, Bird translator. And then she makes like eggs.
Yeah. Let's say again. Oh, yeah. She makes that bird.
I'm not even gonna try because it'd be so weird.
My favorite song from that movie is probably
I always try to take care of
Oh my gosh, it's so good. I love stupid movies.
I love kidding movies.
How much would it cost to go to the Antarctica? It costs a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to go.
Tango's really good. Yeah, Tango's so good.
I love her.
And the Prince and the Frog. I bawled my eyes out. I think I did. It's on Netflix.
What?
When they kill the firefly, I didn't want my kids to bawl.
Nah.
I've already established an up. I still don't have
So sad.
I've never seen
seen up?
No.
Like just the whole thing makes you kind of sad.
Yeah. Hey, son, that's in the beginning.
It's more like a kind of sad.
I know.
Like in the beginning of the movie, you're already sad.
It doesn't sound like
It's a good movie. It's a really good movie.
No, wait, okay.
My dad.
Or maybe what's it about?
It's got Johnny Depp in it. Plays the war that a lot of debauchery, brings a girl and like in the beginning you don't really care for him, but somehow by the end of the movie it makes you don't like him.
No, it's good.
Like I did not like him in the movie too much. But then he got hilarious. Are we done recording?
Oh, wait, hold on. Okay, check this out. Here's another way to look at this. This is a geographical isolation. So these two frogs represent two different species.
They can't reach each other.
When populations become geographically isolated, individuals can no longer mate. Gradually, natural selection produces gene pools so distinct that individuals can no longer produce fertile offspring, even if mating did occur.
Okay, so over on the right, yeah, this is probably not a good example because you could think, frogs can swim, so they could go across. But let's pretend that these are two continents that have moved very far apart and the frogs, couldn't make it across. Now on this side, they happen to change. Why did they change? Maybe the continent on this side has gone to an area that's drier or something. And maybe the leaves fall sooner, and you need to have spots to survive where leaves have fallen everywhere. I don't know. There's a lot of different reasons why organisms could be favored. But anyway, if they become different enough, then even if you remove the river and brought these things back together, these things might not want to mate with these guys, or maybe they can't even mate with those guys anymore. Either way, the population is isolated. And once you have an isolation like that, then any mutation that goes through this population that arises over here will be different from any that arises over here. And so that's an example of a divergence. So that's what this section is all about, how these divergences happen, how you get new species formed. And this is called, we don't call this microevolution. You know what we call it?
Macro.
It's macroevolution.
Like macaroni and cheese.
Like macroeconomics.
Yeah.
Evolution on a large scale, forming organisms that actually look different. That's macroevolution. Microevolution is small changes in the allele frequencies. That happens too. Microevolution leads to macroevolution. If you build up enough small changes in your genes, you can often see a larger change overall. So tonight you're reading 17.2. It talks about all these different species.